Yeah, so I went to school. I was a freshman the fall of 1993, and
Which kind of freshman?
College.
Oh wow,
I'm old.
I wasn't even in high school at that point.
Fuck, really?
I'm sorry.
Oh my god, I thought you were close. You are close now.
I was a freshman in high school in '94.
Okay, so I went to college that fall.
It's not that big a difference, but it sure sounds like one when you put it that way.
Well, and like in the registration packet, the thing they gave you during orientation, there was a login for the thing and a phone number.
Wow.
And you just put the phone number into your dialer, into your Archie or whatever, and I went and got a floppy disk with the dialer that the Vax people gave me because I had a Vax account because I wasn't a computer science major.
For Windows 3.1?
Yeah, that would have been maybe Windows 3.0 even.
But it was a Windows thing.
It was a Windows. I think I pirated Windows 3.1 from somebody else on the floor. Anyway.
I think the statute of limitations is up.
Yeah, Bill Gates, don't come at me. Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod.
Yep.
Period.
It's a podcast.
It's a pod.
Where
cast.
You disclose your history of software theft.
I stole Shogo too.
What?
Yeah. I feel really bad about that.
Shogo?
Shogo. Yeah. One of the guys down the hall from me in my dorm had it, and I was like, hey, can I borrow that? And I just copied it onto my computer and played it there.
Oh, man.
I copied that CD-ROM.
This is probably not the episode for it, but I should tell you about the weekend that I got to college.
Oh, boy.
And the guy in the dorm, it wasn't even my dorm, I was just hanging out with friends, but a guy was downloading RAR files from an FTP and unzipping them and burning them to a CD, and then playing the just released Metal Gear Solid Japanese version.
Did you have Ethernet?
On his chipped, this was 98.
Oh, my God.
But like it was fast internet, it was like broadband internet.
Yeah.
Burning PlayStation games to a disc.
That's a lot of piracy.
It was well, not just pirate. It was fast internet. It was burning discs. It was chipped PlayStation. It was like this onslaught of unbelievable, mind-blowing future tech all at one time.
So
it's like, dude, this came out in Japan hours ago. How are you playing this?
So for me, it was literally walking down the hall, and this guy's Windows. I was playing Doom on his computer because he had a 486 and I had a 386. And I was like, hey, your Windows looks different than mine. And he's like, oh, yeah, I just got Windows 3.1 with this new computer. I was like, really? And so I took 5 floppy disks or whatever it was down the hall. And then suddenly I had Windows. Yeah, he was like, yeah, go for it, man. We didn't realize that. Like, look.
So that would have been even more nefarious if you just quietly borrowed them for a few minutes.
Well, it probably took 2 hours if it was the old times.
Fair.
I don't think we had a really good concept of non-cartridge games costing things when I was a freshman in college.
Or just a good sense of propriety in general around digital ownership.
Well, I mean, it's funny.
This was the nascent days of Napster, and this was even pre-Napster.
It was way pre-Napster. Yeah, this was
for you. Yeah, I'm talking about more for me.
Yeah.
When I got there, we were getting into music file sharing territory.
So okay, this is all going to come back to internet in a minute because this is what we're talking about.
Because I definitely want to tell you how I was in that dorm hanging out with my friends because they had Ethernet, and I got stuck in one of the 3 dorms on campus that only had dial-up.
That's the worst.
It was just like, dude, I was like, this is the reason I went to college. How do I not have the fast internet?
I never had broadband until I moved to San Francisco.
Okay. Well, I think you were
that was in 2000.
You were just on the other side of that inflection point, right? Because if you were there early to mid-90s.
Yeah, they wired the dorms for Ethernet at UT. They started a year after I moved off campus. So it was, I moved off campus in 95, I guess, fall of 95. And they started wiring the freshman dorms that year. Like the freshman dorms got internet that year, some of them.
Right.
And it was, also they had a fast pipe, but they had the students on a really slow, like the dorms were on slow. Like it was way faster than dial-up, but it wasn't like internet to, it wasn't like my gigabit connection at home today.
If I keep commenting on everything I want to talk about, we'll never actually get to the point here.
Yeah.
But I would love to delve into like the 90s era fat pipes, T1s and T3s. And that
1.5 megabits both ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I used to fetishize that stuff from afar so much.
Well, so when I moved to California, I was able to get ADSL, which was like maybe 8 megabits down and
Okay.
like 128 kilobits up.
Sure.
Or I could get SDSL, which was 1.5 megabits both ways.
Okay.
I went with SDSL.
I mean, I remember, I was very envious of somebody I knew, say 95, 96-ish,
Yeah.
maybe 97, that had an ISDN line.
I had an ISDN line.
What was that? What was that? 128
You could do it was
kilobit down or something like
so
that?
you could do two. You could buy single channel or dual channel
Right.
ISDN.
Okay.
Single channel was either 56 kilobits per second or 64 kilobits a second.
Okay.
But it was like unlike dial-up modem speeds, which were like theoretical maximums.
okay.
This was actually a rock solid 64 kilobits,
And was that synchronous up and down?
synchronous up and down.
Okay, not a okay.
But the neat thing about that was if you had two-channel ISDN, it would seamlessly drop from 128 kilobits to 64 kilobits if somebody called you. So it would use the other one as the phone line. You could still talk, and it sounded really good.
Could you get that at any residence, or was it like you had to be in a metropolitan area?
Tennessee had weird rules about ISDN. So Tennessee had some specific thing that made them price ISDN competitively with POTS lines, dial-up lines.
Okay.
And it was maybe $20 more a month for me to get 128 kilobit ISDN.
Man.
And the school ISP, the one that was like built part of my activities fee and was $5 a month or something.
Wait, you guys had school? You had municipal?
Look, back in the old
public
days,
internet?
there was a brief period of time when the school would offer dial-up, like you could dial up into the school's
Wow.
ISP.
You had a way better school system than I did.
Well, no, this was in college.
Oh,
this was
I'm
the
sorry,
college
I'm
one.
sorry.
Yeah,
I thought you
yeah.
were talking
So,
about still
like,
high
this
school.
is we had to do this to shell into the VAX accounts.
I see.
You know,
Okay,
this-
yes.
This is before SLIP, before
Okay.
PPP. Yeah, this was just straight up command line, brother. We were Archieing and Gophering all over the place.
I was thinking still while we were at our respective parents' house before you were in a college environment.
We did not have a modem
Oh,
in my
okay.
parents. Yeah, there was
Okay.
no. The BBS was a long distance call, so I was never allowed to do that. But yeah. So internet, the internet. Eh?
Yeah. I guess, we kind of just decided to show up and talk about the internet.
Yeah.
Networking and IP and a host of other topics. I've got a bunch of them in front of me.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure where we're going to go with this.
Well, I mean,
Internet is fast now.
Internet-
I don't know if you've heard.
I've had fiber for more than a year now,
Yeah.
and it's ruined me.
I randomly just realized right before you got here, I just hit the three-year mark.
Yeah.
Since I've been on Sonic.
I remember when you got the Sonic, and I was like, I need the Sonic.
My eyes are still wide over this internet connection 3 years later. Not just because it's cheap and the company treats its customers really well, but
Yeah.
like I just speed tested before you got here, and I'm 950 up and down
The
for
other
$60 a month.
last night or the night before, I was streaming, and I was playing a game. No, I wasn't streaming. I was watching a stream, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to download Saints Row the Third because I want to show people the horrible character that I made in Saints Row the Third." And I hit the download button, and it was downloading so fast from Steam that it choked out all the other connections on the network because I'd set it to go unthrottled.
Right.
And that's magic.
Yeah.
And it was like it downloaded it. You can download like a 60 gig game. I downloaded Destiny in like 25 minutes the
Yeah,
other
I
day.
just did the same thing.
Yeah,
a few
it's
minutes ago.
Bananas.
It feels good, and I think it is an absolute travesty that this type of speed is coming to the home just at the time that data caps are becoming ubiquitous.
Well,
Except for on my, and I want to be clear really fast that I don't talk about my amazing internet all the time as a way of boasting about it, even if it comes off that way.
I think it comes off that way.
I know, and I don't.
You're a real jerk.
I hate
shoemaker.
that because
I used to sit at home thinking about your internet, just staring wistfully into space.
I mean yours is pretty good too now, right?
It's fine now.
But I mean, in actuality, like I like to talk about it because it's the type of internet that everybody should have at this point.
yeah, and it
like,
should be.
it
It's
is-
like the thing that's.
To be clear, like geographical challenges notwithstanding, obviously, like
Yeah.
laying fiber out in the sticks is a problem still. But like,
It's not though.
well, maybe not even. But
Like-
but what I mean is like the quality of your internet should not be beholden to like shareholders' demand for quarterly earnings at this point, which
Look-
is the problem that a lot of people
so-
like cheap fast internet should be everywhere.
I grew up in a small town, 50,000 people, like comparable to Asheville, where you grew up, in that general area in the mountains.
Yeah.
And they started running dark fiber with the power company started running fiber alongside the power lines because it cost them practically nothing more when they're putting new power cables up to put the fiber on. And then once they had enough of the city covered, they just flipped the switch and people could get hella fast internet for like $40 a month.
Yeah, that's how it should be everywhere.
And like it was none of the bullshit with DSL where if you were too far from the thing then it wouldn't work, and it was none of the problems with Comcast where if the kid next to you is really downloading a lot of porn from like BitTorrent then your internet's going to get slow and shitty.
Right.
It's just awesome, and my parents have had that for 10 years now.
Wow.
Right. So like there's no reason that couldn't have happened except a lot of the ISPs in different parts of the country enacted legislation to prevent municipalities from starting their own ISPs.
It's just de facto monopolies almost everywhere.
Yeah.
Like I believe Comcast instituted. Well, so they've been tracking your data usage for a very long time.
Yeah, for 15 years probably.
But you used to be able to go into your account and just see how much you had used, and it was almost like they were hanging the sword of Damocles over your head.
Well, you could,
because they didn't charge you for it at that time.
Well, once they added the caps, they could do it. But the problem was their tracker thing didn't ever line up with what your router said.
Oh.
It was always a little bit off.
Sure.
It's not like the water meter.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, shocking, right?
Anyway, what I was going to say is that I was able to get the fiber that I'm on now literally the month before Comcast started actually enforcing the data caps.
Well, so
I feel so fortunate, but I also feel terrible that so many people at least in their case, I don't know what it is with other ISPs, but I think it's like $50 a month to remove the data cap.
It was $50 a month to get infinite downloads.
That's insanity.
I pay $80 a month for AT&T's fiber, which doesn't have a data cap at this point. I'm sure they'll institute them at some point, and I'll have to. Hopefully, Sonic will be there by then. But you pay what, like $50 or $55 a month?
Well, with taxes and various fees, it's about 60.
Yeah, but that is, I think, for people who use the internet, we're Brad, I think we're very online people at this point in our lives. You may be less so than me.
Tiers of onlineness, let's say.
Okay. But I mean,
I like to think of myself as somewhere in the middle.
I don't hesitate. $60 a month, $80 a month was a no hesitation purchase for me.
For that kind of speed and that kind of unlimited usage.
Yeah. And I use it every day. It is an important part of my life.
Absolutely.
But the interesting thing about it is it's all based on technology that has changed very little in the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
Like the internet protocol, the transmission control protocol and internet protocol, essentially, I mean, stuff has changed.
Yeah.
But the base bits
of
it
was laid late 70s, early 80s?
And refined into the 90s, yeah. So it's one of the things that's always interesting to me was my first job out of college, I had to understand how network addresses work because I had to maintain the network at the university. It was part of my job was to help work on the network. And my boss at the time, a guy named Rod, who went on to do microscope scale sales and stuff, was like, "Look, do you understand how IP addresses work?" I was like, "Yeah, you type them in and then the computer's connected." No. He's like, "Look, do you understand how it works?" And when he says IP addresses, he's talking about the 4 3-digit numbers. It's a 32-bit address, so each of those 3-digit numbers is one 8-bit number basically, and they range from 0 to 255. And a couple of them are zeros reserved for the entirety of that part of the network. The 255 is a special broadcast address that goes out to everything in that range on the network.
Right.
But the way to think about it is like each of those 4 numbers represent something. And if you start from the right side of the number with the furthest right number, that number is telling you, hey, this is like your street address.
That's the unique ID of that device.
Yeah,
that has that IP.
There's only one of those with that combination of 4 octets.
Right. Maybe to put this in a little more real world context for people that aren't as familiar, like this is the 192.168.1. blank
exactly
in your internal,
and we're talking about the dot blank
IP range.
Yeah, so that is like your home street address. That's saying like I live at 123 Elm Street. That's the 123. The next one is one layer up. So there's in that point there's 2 8-digit it's 256 times 256 potential. Well, no, it's 254 times 254 potential computers in that range, devices in that range, and that one is doing that's kind of like your neighborhood. That's your street, maybe, right?
What are the actual terms? Is that the subnet, or is
no? So the
subnet the whole thing?
The subnet is defined by the subnet mask.
Okay.
So
yeah, which is the /24 for example at the end.
Yeah, in some or the 255.255.255.0.
That's the other thing is I was going to say to make this even more goddamn confusing. There are multiple ways of representing it.
Well, but the thing
because 255.255.255.0
is the same as /24
and IP.0/24 are the same thing.
Pretty much.
Those are different ways of representing the same subnet
I think so.
mask. I'm pretty
the
sure.
/24 is I think it's /32 if it's going to be the same as 0. So the point is, all the subnet mask does is tells a computer that's on that device, that thing, where the router is.
Okay.
So it's saying, hey, everything. Let's take a step further back. When a computer on a subnet, on a network, say you have 20 different devices plugged into your machine at home here, right? And if you have one device that's using a lot of bandwidth, say your computer's hooked up to Steam and it's pulling a lot of stuff down from the internet, or you have a big video file and you want to share it to another computer on the network. Those packets for the most part, for everything that's behind the same router, all of the machines on that network that are turned on are going to see the packets for that transmission. When you copy a file over, it's gonna blast it out to every computer on that node, and then it's going to say the one that's supposed to get it is the only one that's going to pay attention to them. So if you have a network where there's like 3 people that are just doing a little bit of email and 3 people that are doing a shitload of huge file transfers, you maybe don't want to have all those people on the same network because they're going to absorb all of the bandwidth between the router and that node of the network can provide. So what you do is you say, okay, we're going to put the 3 people that hardly use the internet on one router, and they're going to have a different router than the computers. And the router in this case is like a traffic cop.
Are we talking physical routers?
We're talking physical routers.
Or you can do a virtualized.
Look, you can do it virtualized with high-end hardware.
Those are VLANs, right?
Kind of, but then you have to run some special software on the computers, and it gets a little more complicated. It depends. That's complicated, Brad.
Sorry, there's a lot.
No.
It's a lot.
It's like, look, we're talking about a thing that is connected literally billions of devices around the world, all to each other.
I have spent an insane, embarrassing amount of time tinkering with computers in the last 25 years, and I will still say that networking, in all its various incarnations, is still the most...
It's complicated.
Mystical, arcane...
Sometimes it just works.
Insanity of all of it.
Like, I have a FreeNAS server at home, and on some of my computers, it shows up in the network browser. Some of them, it doesn't.
I'm in the same situation.
No idea
why. I've got a couple of ideas why that might be.
Yeah, I've read a lot of man pages.
Might have something to do with what version of SMB you've got installed.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
There's some network discovery stuff.
We can. Yeah. Let's take that one offline. But yeah, okay, subnet mask is saying, hey, all the computers that are in this IP range, and by range I mean if it's 255.255.255.0, what it's saying is all of the computers that are the same first three numbers and different last numbers are on the same node.
Okay.
They're all connected to each other.
Okay.
They're all going to see each other's traffic. They're buddies. They're cool, right? If you want to increase that from 255 computers to 512 computers, or 254 computers to 510 computers, or 508 computers, then you make it 255.255.254.0. So that's saying, hey, we're adding one more range we're adding another group of 254 numbers to this particular node, and all of those computers on that same node share one router.
Okay. So
they're going to all connect to the same router, which will typically be like 192.168.1.1 versus 192.168.1.55 for your personal computer hooked up to that device. Is this making sense?
Oh yeah, no.
Okay.
I pretty much got all this stuff down.
Yeah.
But can devices where, I guess the background that I'm lacking here is knowing exactly what each of those 4 numbers means.
So they don't mean anything.
The third number, I'm trying to think how to put this. Like I had been under the impression that devices where the first 2 numbers were the same, but the third differs can still talk to each other on the same physical LAN. Is that correct?
They all can. Like if theoretically we only had one router on the whole internet and it was at 1.1.1.1, then every other device would be able to speak to that thing. And they'd all see each other. It wouldn't work for obvious reasons because like a billion computers would be talking to each other. But probably at some point in like 1972, that's the way the internet worked. So the thing that determines whether computers can talk directly to each other is whether they're on the same node, same subnet of a network. And that subnet, the size of the subnet is variable based on your use cases. Like if you're talking about a bunch of like just text terminals, you can probably put 10,000 machines on one node and it's not going to be a problem.
I think part of why I'm getting confused is that I have a fairly high-end router that's got 2 discrete LAN ports on it.
Yes.
That can be mapped to different subnets.
Yeah.
And they can talk to each other. Mm-hmm. But I think there's some kind of bridging going on at that point.
You have to, so that means your router is serving either as a bridge or it's partitioning off and it's basically serving as 2 separate routers that just have a defined routing path to each other.
I think that's kind of the case, so that's sort of confusing the issue for me because I have a box that can do that.
Well, we should talk about routers.
Yeah.
So, like, most people probably think of routers as that, like, blue and gray Linksys box that's been in the top of your closet for, like, the last 10 years.
Well, that was the case. I feel like mostly now when people think of routers, they think of, like, the crown of Sauron.
You think so?
Yeah, this god-awful, ugly, that's, like...
Oh, it's got, like, weird horns and stuff on it?
Onyx obelisk with terrifying horns coming out of every side.
Don't buy gaming routers.
That seems to be the bulk of the expensive consumer routers that are being sold these days.
I think the mesh routers are actually where the money is.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. It seems like everybody is getting into the like sleek, sort of Apple-esque looking,
like having bought those
featureless white boxes with
Yeah.
Pretty blue glowing lights.
They work really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you don't have wired Ethernet in your house. They work.
Like, what are some of the popular? I'm trying to think.
There's Google Home makes Wi-Fi routers.
Okay.
You
There's
can buy
one
like a
that
3-pack for a
starts
couple
with an
$100.
E.
Yeah,
Eero?
Eero,
Yeah.
EERO,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
owned by Amazon.
Okay.
They were a startup
that's
in
right,
San
they got
Francisco and
they
got bought a
acquired.
couple years ago.
Yeah.
And then Netgear makes one called Obi or Obly or something like
Orbi.
that. Orbi, yeah.
I've seen that one. And then Ubiquiti, I've got an Edge router but Ubiquiti is getting into that space now. They were more consumer. I mean,
they're like pro. Yeah,
they were
like,
more enterprise level, but they've got a whole line of the kind of friendly, rounded,
exactly
nice looking mesh stuff.
Well, and those things work. This is an aside, but those things work because there's Wi-Fi radios got cheap enough that they're able to put. Like it used to be when you had a mesh, like a non-wired range extender, it would have one Wi-Fi radio and it would just time slice it, so it would automatically start out at half the performance of a wired-in router. So because it would like take half of the radio time to connect to the main router and half of the radio time to connect to the clients. So like the more stuff you connected, the slower it got.
Because everything is waiting its turn.
Yeah, because everything has to wait its turn. Now they just put 2 or 3 radios in those things.
Okay, so you can kind of
like,
leapfrog the traffic.
One is always connected to the router,
wow.
and one is connected to the other devices.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the router is the key to this whole thing. The router is what makes the internet work. The router is basically a traffic cop, and each time you connect to a different network, all the way up to like the main backbone chains of the internet that are, massive, huge bundles of fiber that just go all around the world. Your router knows how to talk to each of them, and it's kind of encoded in the IP address.
Right.
So like
that's the whole point of TCP/IP, right?
Yeah, exactly. Is that like? So
and is it, well, not to derail this
No.
further, but I mean, the whole point is it's kind of a self-propagating, decentralized thing, because my understanding is that it was conceived as a style of network that could withstand nuclear attack.
Well, and
like, isn't that where the ARPA or the DARPA origins began?
It's unclear to me whether that's actually a true statement.
That's what I always heard, was like it needs to be so decentralized that no one location or node being knocked out can take the whole thing down.
Well, but even more important, like they need to be backhoe proof. Like the thing we've learned over the years about the internet is that backhoes.
That's maybe a little more of a likely scenario.
Yeah, backhoes. Some jackass with a backhoe can kill way more internet than all the nukes that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And yeah, the point is that the router says, okay, I know you have a packet, and your packet starts at 192.168.1.1, which is a private address inside your network, and your public IP address is, 212.69.420. Well, not 420, but 42.10, right? And it's like, okay, I'm at .10. To get to the router, I need to go to .1 on this subnet. And then that router says, okay, let's see, you want to send this to 1.2.3.4. Let's see, the route to 1 is up through here. And if it'll send the packet out, and if it doesn't get a response that says, hey, the packet made it, then it'll say, oh, well, we should try the other route because something's broken with that one. And it'll send it, instead of going through Cleveland, it'll go through Cincinnati, and then it gets there just the same. And so kind of the way it works is that it cascades up that IP address until it gets to the biggest number that's in common, right? And then it goes back down the other side. It's kind of like walking upstairs to the top of a hill, and then you get to the top of the hill, and there's 254 other staircases that go down, and it goes down the one that it wants, and then there's 254 staircases to the next one, it goes down to the next one, and so on and so forth.
Right.
And that's a gross oversimplification, just to be clear, but that's in theory, that's what happens on the moment by moment.
And if you haven't ever seen this in action before and you want to, you can pull up a command line on just about any machine in existence at this point.
No, Windows doesn't have it anymore.
Does Windows not have
no
traceroute anymore? Are you serious?
No.
What?
I don't think so. It doesn't have NSLookup. It might still have traceroute.
I think it does have NSLookup.
It does. You have to install it from the optional stuff now. It has to be a POSIX.
Some extra.
Yeah.
Like the SIGWin stuff from way back in the days.
POSIX compliancy.
God, I could have sworn it.
Windows 10.
You can definitely ping stuff, but that's not the same thing. Of course.
Ping's always there.
I could have sworn. Okay, well, find a MacBook or a Unix machine.
Yeah, or just shell into your Vax account.
Anything that has traceroute on it, you can just traceroute to like.
There's a web tool. Type traceroute.
Yeah, you can do that too. Yeah. That's not as cool as watching an actual terminal window.
Well, but what it does is it shows you all those. Each of those stops is a router.
Every hop that it goes through to get to its destination.
Exactly. And in the old days,
you can eyeball some of the named IPs.
Yeah,
to kind of get a sense of like who owns them or where they are, or a bunch of fun stuff like that.
Well, and that stuff comes into play. Like, remember a few years ago when Netflix got bad on Comcast? Like your Netflix connection, your videos look bad all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Well, it's because they stopped having a peering relationship with whoever Comcast and Netflix's host, which I guess is Amazon, stopped having a peering relationship with each other. So that meant that they were no longer they did not want to give free access to their networks. There was a point in between those two places where free access to the networks was delayed. So instead of going on the fast route, they had to go all the way around. And
Is that because of, like, say, business politics, not because of
it was because Comcast
oversight?
wanted to gouge Netflix for money.
Right, like it was intentional. Is
Yeah,
what I'm
it was.
saying, right?
That was an intentional. Routing can be political.
Yeah.
It turns out.
Yeah.
Now, there's other things when we talk about like edge of network and center of network. Like the center of network are like the big backbones run by AT&T and like giant telecoms, right? And they're huge pipes that go all over the world. There's cables that run from like Perth to Singapore and New York to London and all over the place.
Well, go ahead. I finish your thought. I just wanted to talk about undersea cables.
Well, I was also going to say one of the things that makes downloads really fast are edge networks. So like Akamai is the famous one. They did this before anybody else did. But everybody has, Amazon has them now. They put data centers around the world. And what that is literally a device that's connected into the ISP, the local ISP endpoints for your region. And so you can get really high speeds because they're not actually going across the main part of the
Like
internet.
they're kind of mirroring or replicating things that
Exactly.
you might need quickly in multiple locations.
Yeah, and like when we were at Tested, we used those for podcasts and stuff like that. If you watch YouTube, those videos are very early on stored locally, but really go out to the CDN stuff at the edges of the network really quickly.
You see a lot of that stuff now with like the Google Stadia and the Microsoft xCloud stuff ramping up. Like they've got to have a lot of like hardware close to you physically for that stuff to make sense.
And the interesting thing that's happened in the last few years is it's moved that has moved from just storage, which is what it used to be, to now it's storage and compute. So like that's why Stadia works, and that's why Microsoft's upcoming game streaming service and all those things. That's why they all work.
Where are all these data centers?
All over the place.
Are they just buying up like old like rural like farmland that's not being used and building gigantic warehouses full of air conditioning?
So there's two things you need for a data center.
Yeah.
You need space.
Yep.
You need cheap power, and you need temperate climate or
Okay, I was
access
gonna
to
say
cool
cooling,
water.
right?
Yeah, because you need a ton of cooling.
Okay.
So a lot of them are like on the Columbia River in Oregon. A lot of them are places where there's cheap solar power or cheap wind power or cheap hydro power. A lot of them are in like old office buildings.
I feel like using natural bodies of water for cooling is
it's probably going to be fine.
Questionable.
I wouldn't worry about it. Look, there's just a little bit of heat going into those rivers. It's not going to
the immediate. Well, if it's a river, it's probably less of a problem. But like I don't know if any lakes are in use. Like
harm. Those ecosystems are probably really robust. They're going to be. But look, the water's going to be a couple degrees warmer in a few years.
The image that came to mind is a gigantic data center next to a lake with a bunch of dead fish floating in it.
Look, what's going to happen
to power everybody's cloud-based gaming, and that's maybe the most like dystopian cyberpunk vision.
I think it could be good for the salmon. Think that maybe if the water's a little bit warmer, they'll be extra horny when they get to the end, and there's going to be a lot more salmon at the end. It could be a real boon for the environment. It's probably fine. I'm sure somebody's thought about this, Brad.
Real fast undersea cables.
Yeah.
You ever seen one?
I saw that bit in Iron Man where he is under the water and he's lasering the cable.
Is it big?
It was thick.
I just want to know, like
2 C's thick.
2 C's.
Thick.
Oh, that kind of thick.
Thick.
See, I told you I'm not that online.
This was an extremely online podcast.
No, not if I can help it. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. That's just a little side topic, but I've always been curious about like what hardiness, what level of robustness you need in a cable that literally spans.
They're
an
armored.
ocean.
Like they have Kevlar armor around the edges of them and stuff like. If you want to go down a Wikipedia hole sometime, look up undersea cable laying ships. It's fascinating.
Wow. Yes. Okay.
It's like special ships.
I will do that right after. That sounds.
Yes.
Yeah.
We should. If anybody's listening and knows about this, we would love to have you on as a guest. I would like to talk about this.
Or if you can get us out on the water to.
I'm okay not doing that. It's a long trip.
Or even I'm even just curious, like kind of what the capacity is in terms of data, but also what the size of the actual, like, are they fiber?
I assume they're fiber at this point. Yeah,
like
I can't
thick
imagine
of a cable, like how much?
They're big. They're thousands and thousands and thousands of fibers. Like, Yeah.
Anyway, that's a side topic, but
it
blows my mind that you can
run a piece of glass.
Yeah, well, you can introduce
a
like a data vessel into an environment that inhospitable and have it work.
Yeah. Consistently.
Yeah, because I mean,
until the Russians tap in.
That's miles underneath the water. Like imagine the pressures, the depth, and stuff like that.
Yeah, but the glass doesn't compress. It's fine.
Okay, fair.
It's a Glomar Explorer is what you need to pull that thing. Yeah, we should. I seriously would. I'd love to talk about that. But I don't know anything about that stuff, and it's always been fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how the internet works. It's really straightforward. I think we're about wrapped up here.
It's everything there is to know.
All your questions answered.
God, I could sit here asking questions for hours probably. What is there? Like I almost brought up NAT at one point because I know that's kind of the thing.
Oh, so NAT's easy to explain.
I know what it is.
Yeah.
But it's more. I guess the problem with all of this is that in any one case, the basic concept is easy to explain, but there are so many details and esoteric behaviors around it that actually understand. Like for instance, like explaining like its network address translation.
Yeah.
It's basically the thing that takes the traffic from outside the router and translates it to which device it needs to go to behind the router.
Remember when you had you had your Discman and like you were going on a field trip with a girl and you would take your splitter, your headphone splitter, and plug that into the Discman so you could both listen to the same music on the long bus ride?
Well,
yeah.
Right.
It's just like that.
Well,
that's all NAT does.
Okay.
It's that simple.
Well, the reason I bring it up is that like then there are Type A and Type B NATs. There's like open NATs, moderate NATs, like
promiscuous NATs. You want a promiscuous NAT?
Like that's what I mean. There are so many variations on every single one of these things that actually having a good understanding is a lot to take on.
So the NAT situation, NATs are really important. NATs are good. They help us secure our local networks because like I don't know about you, I'm bad about updating all of the stuff in my personal network.
Yeah, well, even if you're good about updating it, you just don't want all that stuff exposed.
Yeah, like having a raw dog internet address for all your devices is like ill-advised.
After we come back from the break, ask me about the time that I set up Nginx. On my server and opened a port to it for like a week or so.
My COVID.
I should show you the access log and all of the terrifying IPs that were probing it constantly.
When I had the COVID SDSL, I ran a Windows NT server that I just raw dogged out on the internet. And about 2 weeks after I did that, I got an email from the ISP that was like, "Hey, we're turning off your internet until you take the server offline."
Oh, wow.
Because it's bad.
Wow.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
It's all infected and shit. And I just had to wipe it. I was like, take the hard drives out in the backyard and axe them. They
quarantine that machine.
It was bad.
Wow.
Mistakes were made.
Yeah. It's rough out there.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Should we talk? We haven't talked about IPv6 at all.
No. I was kind of putting that off.
Yeah, it's the big numbers. They're scary. They don't look normal.
I think we should definitely take a break before that.
Okay.
I need a drink of water before we get into that. Those addresses are gigantic.
So many digits. I have questions about your router.
Okay.
Brad.
I will do my best to answer. It's a complicated piece of kit.
Okay. Why didn't you just buy a Netgear?
Well, I was on a crappy old Asus for a long time. Well, it was the N66U. It was actually
that was a fine
at the
fine
time
router,
when it came out. It was great. It was like that was a workhorse.
Were you running like DDWRT on it? Like
I ran Tomato USB on it for a while, and then I actually went to Merlin.
Oh, that's bold choice.
Which is what's based on the. It's like a lot of the.
It's a fork, right?
DDWRT features, but with the core of the Asus stuff. Do you really want to get into this? Well, I guess we created this podcast to get into this.
Yeah,
right? The reason that I stopped using Tomato on that router was because Tomato did not expose the hardware accelerated NAT on that router.
Oh,
so when I got fiber,
it wasn't fast enough.
Ran a speed test. I was like, why am I getting like 160 megabit on this fiber connection?
Okay, so then
I dug into it and I was like, oh god, my custom firmware on this router is not allowing me to get the full speed on the WAN port on this router that I can now enjoy with my fiber.
This is funny because you and I had the exact same problem. We went completely different directions with it.
So
because I had a DWRT router running when I got the fiber and I did the speed test and I was like 800 megabits. I was like, why the fuck isn't this? Where's my gigabit? So they came out, they tested, did the line test, the whole thing.
Oh, you actually got people out?
Oh yeah, I'm a real ass.
See, I'm proud because I at least managed to.
Well, mine, if mine had been 160, I would have known. Yeah. But at 800, I was like, this is close enough that it should be.
When you're that high, it's just like, okay, there's something on there.
What the hell?
Yeah.
So I did the test, and I was like, oh, shit. He came out, he tested the line, it was fine. Yeah. I plugged into the router directly, the AT&T provided router directly. It was fine.
To be fair, 800 is still pretty good.
I was fine with it. I would have been fine with it.
Like most services are not. Well, actually, I'm starting to see more
People are starting to advertise the actual number. Not the
More heavy
theoretical
download
max.
services like game clients are actually starting to just about max out that connection now.
Origin will max it out.
Yeah.
Epic will max it out.
Steam
will max it out sometimes.
Just in the last 2-3 months has gotten way faster for me. Like Steam would top out about 60 megasecond before, and it's pushing 80, 90.
I had 110 the other day, which I didn't think my connection was capable of.
That's about the max.
That's near theoretical maximum.
That's just about the actual gigabit.
Well, so anyway, I went to the store. I went to Best Buy that afternoon and just bought a Google Home router.
Thing, like the whatever's there.
Well, yeah,
the easy thing.
I was like, this is what they give to the Google Fiber people, right?
Yeah,
This will work. And it did.
Yeah.
And it was great.
To be clear, that Merlin firmware, which is based on the actual Asus.
So they're using the Asus kernel and core. They just put a UI on top of it.
Even though most of that stuff is closed source, I think they're still able to build on it. Anyway, that got me the majority of the gigabit.
Okay.
But I was having other issues with network performance and with a whole other rabbit hole to go down. But I was trying to get some multicast stuff working, some network discovery, if you're familiar with that stuff, like MDNS.
Yeah, so you can.
I basically got a bunch of weird shit running on my FreeNAS box.
Okay. Yeah.
This is
We'll talk about NAS's free NAS later.
That's like probably a whole separate thing. I basically because I am old and want to keep a local music collection.
So you're so much older than I am, Brad.
I want to have all of the local Apple-esque kind of AirPlay
so you're
stuff,
running like
but without having to run
subsonic,
without having to run a Mac Mini or a MacBook plugged in somewhere all the time.
So you got that subsonic?
No, actually, I'm using. There's a little open source. I don't even know what the protocol is. It's whatever like an iTunes home server is. It's I believe the audio protocol is DAAP.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So it's that. It's just a guy.
It's what became AirPlay eventually, right?
Yeah, AirPlay is built on it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just an open source server. It's on GitHub. It has the.
Do you have to package that up? You get package.
It has the incredibly catchy name of forked DAAPD.
Oh yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, I had to get it compiled and running on my machine. It's mostly developed for Linux, but and this is FreeBSD we're talking about. But anyway, why am I rambling about this again? Oh, I was trying to basically I was having a bunch of issues with devices not being able to discover each other on the network.
One of the things that's really frustrating is that if your router doesn't support the right stuff, then there's no amount of you fixing it on the PCs and
that's
consoles
exactly
that is work.
That you just nailed exactly why I ended up going out and getting this kind of prosumer, almost enterprise grade router. I started looking into it because multicast, ZeroConf, Bonjour, whatever you call it, it's supposed to be a way to just get devices to see each other that support that protocol.
The idea is that they can send out a packet that says, hey, here's what I'm able to do, and then everybody else listens to that packet and they send back, hey, what I'm able to do.
It's how automatic network printer discovery works now.
Yeah.
So it's exactly what you said. I started looking into the various idiosyncrasies of different consumer routers, and it was exactly that. It was this manufacturer didn't quite implement the protocol properly, so there's just nothing you can do to make it work right on your network if you're using their router. And so I was just I'm just going to get the most IT ass hardcore real router with a command line that I can.
There's something to be said for that because if you look at consumer router space, those are designed to be good for 2 years, and then a new version of the spec will be out, and people are supposed to just upgrade and throw the old one out.
Right.
And Wi-Fi has slowed way down in the last 10 years. So instead of having new Wi-Fis every 2 years, we get them about every 4 or 5 now. And the access point router you bought is basically the thing that would be in a conference center where 300 you could connect 300 people to your Wi-Fi here, Brad.
I saw researching this thing. I saw somebody who runs a small local ISP said that they tried just on a lark. They tried using it to route their entire ISP and that it worked fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's
a small town.
Yeah.
I just wanted something as extensible and flexible and powerful as I could get.
Well, and they probably continue to support and add new stuff to it.
Oh, totally. They will support this. It runs Linux. It just runs a stripped down network.
Can you log into it and download stuff from...
Totally. I spent a shitload of time at the command line. I can set up a VPN on it. I can VPN to it from anywhere now.
That's bonkers.
It has multiple DHCP servers on it. I SSH'd into it and changed which DHCP server it was running.
Do you have dynamic DNS clients?
It's also got multiple dynamic DNS. So I've got all that stuff.
It's funny. I run a FreeNAS server to do a lot of that stuff.
Right. So a lot of that is just built into my router.
That's funny.
So I changed to it's got DNS mask on it.
Okay.
So I changed to that as my DHCP server because the bonus there is that anytime it assigns an IP to anything, because it's also the DHCP server, it also maps the host name of that device to your local domain.
Yeah. See,
So,
that's a thing that most routers are really bad at.
Right. So like I just set a domain of .lan on my router, and now any device on my network, if I need to like ping it or SSH to it or whatever, I just type whatever the host name is .lan to get to it.
Really nice.
So I don't have to memorize IP or look up IPs for devices on my network anymore. Like, it's amazing.
See, I do.
If you're like me and you're plugging like random Raspberry Pis headless into your network,
yeah, who doesn't do that?
like
it's a perfectly normal thing.
You know, like if you want to be able to get to devices on your network and do things with them, it's really helpful to not have to like know what the IPs are.
Picturing you with a much bigger neck beard.
Totally.
Right now.
Like fuck, my destiny is to become I've been reading up on like history of Unix stuff a lot lately. I'm just fascinated with. I want to be a graybeard.
You're on your way, man.
All I've ever wanted in my entire life is to be a graybeard. But not the bad kind.
No.
Like the good.
Yeah,
kind.
with no Stallmans.
Yes, no.
Yeah, so I went the complete opposite way, and I have an app that configures mine, and it just works.
Yeah, I can totally see the appeal. It's honest.
But again, like the thing that you said is exactly it. When I hit something that it can't do, I'm just boned.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do about it.
So this is the like absolute 180 reverse philosophical approach, which is this thing does absolutely nothing that you don't tell it to do out of the box. Like, it doesn't even have a DHCP server enabled by default.
That's bananas.
So to use it at all, you have to plug it directly into your PC and then manually configure an IP address to even access it.
Do you have to use a serial cable?
No, you can use just an Ethernet cable to do that.
Okay.
And then you have to go into it
you have to do an automatic
manually
IP address,
enable DHCP. But I did buy a serial to USB cable just in the event. I had it become completely.
I thought I was joking.
No, I'm serious. I still don't know why, but like a month into having it, something on it crashed, I think.
Well, that is your insurance. Like if something goes real bad sideways.
It may have been, I don't know what crashed on it, but it became completely inaccessible. And all I could do was factory reset it.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't get to it from my PC. And then I was like, wait a minute, it has a serial port on it.
Yeah.
So I was like, wait a minute, if I had a serial port, I could have just at least gotten into the router and fixed it without having to reset it. So I have a serial.
I'm jealous now.
I know, like it's a nightmare rabbit hole to go down if you don't want to deal with it, but if you do, it's like the most fun thing ever.
Can I borrow your USB to serial cable, man?
It's pretty good.
So we were talking about Wi-Fi a little bit during the break.
Yeah, that's another thing I flagged to. Talk about the thing specifically that I mentioned.
At some point, we should talk about Wi-Fi as it's worth a whole episode. It's complicated. Like there's Wi-Fi 6 is coming soon.
Yeah.
I think you can even buy hardware now that's like hardware compliant, but probably the software is not ready yet.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at that at all, but that seems like where we're at. Wi-Fi is fascinating because I grew up with, I started wireless internet was a thing that when I was at Ars Technica in '99, I reviewed a Diamond kit that had basically a PCM-CIA card that worked in a laptop and a PCI probably card, maybe an ISA card, but probably a PCI card that plugged into a desktop, and that would let you connect those two things wirelessly and use
kind of standard.
It wasn't a standard. It was just some bullshit that they'd licensed from somebody in China. And because that's what Diamond, just to be real, that's what Diamond did. They would licensed 3D FX chips and then built cards on them. Mm-hmm. They licensed REL sound accelerator DSP software, built sound cards on that. And then they did a bunch of other weird stuff package up a MP3 player with
I've got an old Diamond Rio in a
PMP 300,
in a closet
the classic
somewhere.
black one.
I got it at a
circle?
yard sale. It was given to me at a yard sale for free. And I don't think I've ever actually used it.
When I cleaned the garage and got rid of all the tech stuff, that one is one of the things that I kept. Because I was like, this was the first MP3 player.
That's a piece of history.
It used a smart media card. You could hold a whole CD on there. Wow. And you could run, and it didn't scratch the. Anyway.
So late 90s.
Late 90s, 99.
When did you see the actual first Wi-Fi, like the stand, like 802.11 stuff?
One of the very first things I wrote when I came on staff at Max PC in 2000, in June or July of 2000, the October 2000 cover story, which is what we were working on when I started in the summertime, was about wireless. And for that, we got an Orinoco, which was a subdivision of Lucent, which was one of the people that did the standard.
I remember Lucent.
Yeah, they got bought by somebody at some point along the way. I can't remember, 3Com or somebody, probably Cisco, yeah. They had sent us an 802.11b, the first Wi-Fi standard router, or it may have even just been an access point. It may not have been it was a router, but it didn't have any Ethernet ports, and we had a couple of PCMCIA cards so we could test it out. And like at that point, it's funny. It's hard to say whether laptops took off because of Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi took off because laptops got big, because they both happened at the same time.
Okay. So to step back real fast,
Yeah.
the thing we talked about during the break, the reason I wanted to discuss this is that the way I would put it is obviously I remember the time before Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm familiar with the time after it because it's ubiquitous now.
Yeah.
But I don't have any memory of that transition because Wi-Fi still, even to this day, feels a little bit like magic. Or it feels like one of those...
It's just always there.
Well, I guess what I actually mean is it feels like one of those things where I stop and say, I can't believe how good we have it now. So I would think...
Oh, Grampy Brad.
Right.
Had it
So
again.
I would think that when it first came on the scene, I would have been like my hair would have blown back when I saw it for the first time. But I just have no memory of like seeing Wi-Fi for the first time, like having it become part of your daily tech existence. Like I don't remember that transition, that inflection point at all.
So for me, we had Wi-Fi stuff around, but if you were using, it wasn't really fast enough. Like if you were playing games, if you were downloading stuff, if you had a good internet connection at home, maybe 802.11b wasn't probably fast enough for like your data. Like it was.
Maybe I think I see what you're getting at with the laptop stuff. I think it was maybe because I didn't lead an existence where it was necessary.
That's it. Yeah, you didn't have a laptop probably, right?
Everything was on a PC at that time.
You didn't have a laptop, you didn't have a phone, so your devices were all plugged in, and then all of a sudden you got an iPhone or you got your first laptop.
Yes.
And it was like when Intel baked Wi-Fi into the laptop chipsets with what they called them, Centrino? Is that it?
That sounds right.
I'm going to look that up.
That's definitely a brand.
Sure.
That's definitely an Intel brand.
Yeah, I think Centrino. I think Centrino was basically
Kind of their mobile platform or their laptop feature-rich platform.
Yeah, so it is. It's the why. It's I can't believe I couldn't remember this because it was such a ubiquitous piece of branding. For 10 years. For me, it was when I got a Windows XP laptop. So that would have been like 2001, probably 2004.
XP came out in 03?
Yeah, it was early 2000s.
Yeah.
And I had gotten Microsoft when Microsoft sent out new versions of Windows to tech magazines, they would send discs, but they usually also would send like their stock laptop, the one that was like the one that all the developers were working. Before that, it was a PC, but.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. XP was 2001.
2001. It was SP2 was what you're thinking about, which was 2003 probably. So they sent me this compact laptop that had Wi-Fi built in, and
God, that early, huh?
And I was just like, oh shit, this changes everything, because it was one thing to have the laptop that had the card dangling out of the side and like it wouldn't fit in your bag. You had to take the card out and you only plugged it in when you needed it. But when it was just always there and you could sit on the couch and watch TV and browse the internet at the same time, like I hang out on Shack News or whatever I was doing at that period in my life.
Big shout out to Shack News for getting me started with Ubiquity stuff.
So much of my networking information came from Shack News early in the day.
Yep.
But yeah, it was a thing where you're like, oh, this is going to be a really big deal. But man, laptops still really suck. And
yes, absolutely.
And then I got a laptop that didn't have the card built in. I got one of those Dell XPSs that was like the one that my office assigned me, a big gaming laptop. And I had to put the card back, and I was like, oh, this is like, I got to get one of those Centrinos. That's the business.
Right.
And then sometime in like 2007, around the time the iPhone came out, just everything started having Wi-Fi built in.
You were 100%. I'm realizing this as you were explaining all this. Because that's what made it ubiquitous. Was like I didn't even know or care what Wi-Fi was until I got an iPhone.
Did the Xbox 360 have Wi-Fi built in, or did you have to get an adapter for that?
I don't think the first model did.
I think it had. I think you bought like a USB adapter for it, right?
The 360S has it.
Yeah, the second.
If I'm not mistaken,
the gray one,
the first full redesign, the black one, like the full,
the shiny.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that model launched with internal
PS3
Wi-Fi.
had Wi-Fi though, didn't it?
Yes.
Maybe?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, and the Wii definitely had Wi-Fi because it didn't have an Ethernet port.
Right.
So yeah, like
okay, you're right. It was probably 05, 06 to 08ish is when Wi-Fi really like blew up as a daily.
Well, and at the same time, like netbooks were starting.
Yeah.
So like laptops went from being like an expensive thing for business to a thing that you could spend $300 and get a shitty laptop that had Wi-Fi built in.
Right.
And between that and the phones and the consoles and like then all the set-top boxes hit and Roku and Apple TV and all that, everything started going from Ethernet first to Wi-Fi first around the time N hit. because 802.11g was okay. It was 54 megabits, and which meant you got like faster than it was faster than your internet connection
Right.
for the first time.
Because, I mean, internet connections back then were probably like, what, 10, 20 megabits?
10 or 25 megabits, yeah.
At best.
But for a fast Comcast,
Yeah.
you'd get 25 megabits back then. Yeah, so they would get you had something that was faster than your outbound internet connection. Most people don't share files between computers on their home network, so it didn't matter how fast it was. And the range was enough that you could put one of those things in the middle of your house and cover pretty much everywhere but the edges.
Yeah.
And then N hit, and that changed the whole thing. Like N opened up, like you're talking about multiple 100 megabit speeds. It could make it faster if you put more antennas in, and then AC built on that. And at this point, like my wireless network is 800 megabits a second at home or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
6 is going to do even more than that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
You should, well, one of the downsides of the ubiquity of Wi-Fi now.
I mean, I can use my phone on the toilet.
Well, yeah, that stuff's good. What I was going to say is
pros
that
and
I
cons.
live in an apartment here.
Yeah.
Like there are,
Can I open up? I'm going to look.
who know? Are you able to do that?
I can see on my phone. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you could do that on a phone. But if I run the site scan on my access point here, I can probably pick up. I don't know how many.
I bet there's
dozens.
200.
I was going to say. I started to say, is it in the dozens or is it in the hundreds
I'm
of other 2.4 gigahertz networks that I can pick up here?
so just using
Like,
my
it's a
phone.
problem.
I'm seeing probably 50.
Yeah. So I would guess it is probably at least 100.
Well, so that's
Other people's residential Wi-Fi networks
that was
overlapping with my apartment.
that was one of the things early on with Wi-Fi, when the Wi-Fi standards people used to come out and talk to us when new standards were coming out, and they didn't expect B to take off like it did. Like if you think about, remember when Linksys was selling that blue router,
Yeah,
the famous one,
the WRT 54G.
yeah, the WRT54G. That was the G one. There was a B one as well.
Okay.
They sold that B one, and they sold it for like $100 by the end of B, and everybody fucking bought them.
Yep.
And they didn't expect B to have to, like, I think when they built those standards, they didn't expect those to share space with multiple access points. They didn't, there were only 13 channels. They couldn't, like, they couldn't channel hop. They couldn't spread spectrum. They were bad at sharing time on the channels, so you could actually clog up the radio waves. G got a little bit better, but it was still just incremental improvement. It wasn't until N hit that they were able to actually share space. Because now, like, you have 200 access points in range here, probably.
Yeah.
But shit still works.
It does.
Your router is probably a little more robust than the others.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, that's not to go back to that stuff too much, but that's another advantage of the high-end stuff is that my router is a separate device from my access point. So
That annoys me.
Oh, I love it because I can put the access point wherever I need it to be to
that's
get the
true.
best signal coverage in the house.
I should do that with the mesh network too. Though.
Well, yeah, that's the same principle. But,
Yeah. The other benefit to that is that you don't have to upgrade your router to get the new Wi-Fi
that's what I was
standard.
going to say. Like I could just sell this access point on Craigslist and get a better one later. But there's still so many devices using
B.
G.
G.
Well, mostly G from what I've seen.
I think the 3DS was maybe the last thing that I had was a G device.
Well,
'Cause
I'm
I
thinking
unplugged my
more
Wii.
like we've got a robot vacuum. It's not a Roomba, but it's a
Yeah.
D-bot. Like that's a G device. Like all of
Does
our
it have to stay on the internet?
for scheduling and stuff. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be connected 24/7.
Yeah.
But like our smart plugs do. Like we've got a number of like cheapo
Oh.
smart plugs for lamps and stuff around here, and those all have to be connected pretty much all the time, and they certainly don't stay that way. And whether that's like bad device firmware, like poorly implemented
Yeah,
stuff,
that's you should get rid of all the G devices.
Yeah.
Well, because the other thing
like
is,
I mean, that's just what. I mean, these are still like new products coming onto the market that are still G.
God, really?
Yeah.
That's shameful.
Yeah, totally.
So you know that when you run G stuff on it, your router probably doesn't do this, but on consumer routers, often if you're running like G devices on an N or AC router, it'll slow down the AC router to G.
I think mine has
Yours probably partitions it.
multiple radios.
Yeah, yeah.
Judging by the settings.
I think, I mean, it's funny how quickly Wi-Fi went from a neat but unreliable thing to a hyper reliable, really useful, like incredibly important to my day-to-day activities technology.
The range of things, behaviors, activities, whatever that it has enabled around the home and the office is like kind of mind blowing.
I still run wires. You run wires to your like desktop.
Yes,
PC and stuff, right?
I
Do your consoles wired?
Yes, I quietly have Ethernet run the entire perimeter of my apartment, basically, like from literally one end to the
It's
other.
like a Faraday cage.
But it's very.
Yeah.
I don't know. You tell me. I hope it's very subtle.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, it's run the entire.
I see it now that I'm looking.
It's
but
run the
yeah.
entire length of the apartment around door jams. And
You did a nice job tacking it up
stuff.
above the door jams.
Thank you. It's pretty. I hope that it's pretty inconspicuous. But like as good as Wi-Fi is, I still I want consoles plugged into a hardline. I want anything that where latency and or throughput are a concern.
If I'm playing multiplayer,
yeah.
Well, and yeah, there's reasons that you want that. We're not going to get into that today. It's too much. I didn't read about it. I don't want to make an ass of myself in public.
Yeah.
I feel like we should talk about IPv6.
Yeah, we should. I've been putting it off because it is incredibly technical.
It's not.
Well, I guess not.
So
anything where you're talking about bit depth though is
look.
kind of inherently technical.
Okay. So I'm going to multiply some numbers here. I'm going to get the calculator
What is
out.
an IPv6 address? Is 32 digits?
So don't even worry about that. An IPv4 address.
Uh-huh.
What I want to know is what the fuck happened to IPv5. I've never been able to get an answer to that.
Same thing as DirectX 4.
Yeah, and iPhone 9
and the iPhone 9.
Yeah,
just
it's a bad number, unsexy number.
Yeah.
Okay, so IPv4 addresses are 4 8-bit numbers, right? So that's 1 to 256 in binary. Right, 8 bits is 1 to 2, or 0 to 255, whatever.
That's really where the stuff becomes hard for the layman to deal with, is when you start getting into non-base 10 numbering schemes and so forth.
You don't have to worry about that. You have to worry about it being
like when you start getting to hexadecimal and binary and stuff like that. Like it gets to be a real pain in the ass if you're not.
No. Okay, so here's the thing. Each IPv4, it's IPv4 quartet, right? So there's 4 numbers.
Yeah.
And they're 8 bits each. Right. So that's 32 bits total.
I mean, like you can look at an IP address, at an IPv4 address, and know how it's constructed. What I mean is, on a philosophical level, when you are explaining to somebody, it's 4 8-bit numbers, like the average person is not going to be able to tell you what an 8-bit number looks like.
An 8-bit number is a range from 0 to 255.
Right. Yes.
Okay. So if you take 255 or 256, because really we can't zero, we'll start with 1 for math purposes. So multiply 256 by 256 by 256 by 256 is the theoretical maximum address space for IPv4.
Right.
That's 16,777,216 numbers.
That's it?
That's it.
Did you say million?
Million. Did I do that math wrong?
That can't be right.
256 times 256.
There is no way there are only 16 million.
Yeah, you're right.
Devices on the internet.
I might have done
that. Has to be in the billions.
Oh, here we go.
I
only did it 3 times.
Okay.
Yeah, I need to multiply 256 one more time. Okay, that's 4.29 billion.
There you go. That sounds
the
like
right
a number I've heard before.
Yeah.
But even that, I would guess, is there are more people than that on the planet. I would guess even that is nowhere near adequate.
So here's the interesting thing: IPv6, each octet, each of those numbers, each of those quartets, is 32 bits instead of 8 bits.
Right.
So it's this 4.29 billion number times 4.29 billion times 4.29 billion times 4.29 billion. I'm going to do that.
So there will very likely never be an IPv7.
Hold on.
What you're saying.
I'm going to tell you. This is the number of addressable. If my math is right, and it probably isn't. So please let us know.
I can fact check you because everybody loves
3.4 times 10 to the 38th.
Say again.
3.4 times 10 to the 38th.
That's a lot of zeros.
Yeah.
That's a lot of zeros.
That might be too many. But anyway, the upshot is there's a shitload of those addresses. And even if every toaster on the planet has one of these addresses, we're probably still okay.
I typed IPv6 address space into Google, and the first recommendation is IPv6 address space atoms in the universe. So
yeah,
if that tells you...
It's like
yeah, you're right. 3.4 times 10 to the 38th. That is correct.
This is one of those interesting things that, like, the relationship between our lifespan and the start of the universe versus the heat death of the universe.
Yes.
Like the start of the universe to now is a rounding error in the total.
It is not even a blink of an eye.
Yeah, it's
in the hundreds of trillions of years.
Numerically, a human lifespan and the time from now to the Big Bang,
yeah,
exactly the same when compared to the heat death of the universe.
Right.
We're okay on the IPv6 numbers. They really over-engineered the shit out of this one.
If techtarget.com is to be believed, the size of the range of the number of IPv6 addresses is equivalent to there are 2 to the 52nd addresses for every observable star in the known universe.
I don't think that's enough.
So I think we're okay.
So
anyway,
the reason they look different though is because instead of being notated in just decimal numbers like we do now,
they're hexadecimal.
They're hexadecimal.
Right. Which means letters.
0 through 9, A through A, B, C, D, F.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I just mean, like, in a practical sense, when somebody looks at those, like, it's way less legible than...
Maybe G2.
Okay.
I can't remember.
That is far less legible from a practical standpoint.
It's a pain in the ass.
Than even an IPv4.
Yeah. Well, and it's also further complicated by the fact that IPv6 addresses don't have to be... if you have a quartet that's zeros,
you can shortcut
it. You just put 2 colons, you just leave them empty,
and it just
knows what to do.
An extra colon implies that it's all zeros.
Yeah, exactly.
I read that, yeah.
So, and also, fundamentally, it's a lot easier for me to remember a number from 0 to 255 than it is for me to remember
right, that's what
hexadecimal.
I mean.
Yeah. Anyway, it's complicated.
It's far less just sensible or comprehensible to the average person.
The nice thing is that the rollout for IPv6 took a long time. I think the standard was ratified in 98, so it's now 21 years old. My phone, when I typed in what's my IP, I was really surprised because my Verizon iPhone gets a IPv6 address.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Your local, I don't know, you're probably on your Wi-Fi. It's funny, if you type IP into Google, it just gives you your local IP address now, which used to be a hard thing to find. You used to have to go to a site.
Yeah.
But yeah, my public IP address, also it doesn't render on the page because it's too long to fit without scrolling.
Wow.
So nice job, Google.
Yeah,
really useful information.
It's a great system. Do you have any sense of where we're at with the remaining stock? Well, it can't even be a remaining stock. We have to be using pretty much all of the IPv4 addresses, right? At this point?
So there's the IATA, and if you ask me what it stands for, I'm not going to remember. Is the organization that is in charge of doling out IP addresses, and there's some regional telcos or regional organizations that work with the telcos to do that as well. Five of them, I think, if I remember right. There are always IP addresses coming up free because like companies go out of business and they've leased a range or bought a range or whatever, and it's suddenly available. It seems like it's not as pressing as it once was, because if you think about it, like the vast number of PCs and stuff are probably behind a NAT at this point.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, it's actually the number of external IPs has probably dropped quite a bit, right? As people
I think there's a lot of devices still on, but it seems like places where this is going to be a problem have, like, the fact that Verizon's doling out IPv6 addresses instead of IPv4 addresses makes me think we're probably okay.
Is that telling?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you think about there's 230 million people in the country and everybody has a phone, and 30 or 40% of them are probably on Verizon, then yeah, I think that's where we're at with that. I think the larger problem is if like you're Google and you need a bunch of IPv4 addresses for servers and stuff because people are still on IPv4, then you probably have a larger concern. But for normal consumers, I don't think we have to worry too much about running out of IPv4 addresses. Although I did see a thing a couple of weeks ago about considering changing the IP spec to remove some of the reserve. There's 4 or 5. There's more than that, but there's a bunch of blocks of IP addresses that are reserved for special things, like 192.168.blank are basically for private IP addresses that aren't addressable by the internet at large. And what that means is there's a router with NAT running between those addresses and the real world.
Not to derail. I became curious why that specific range was in use.
Yeah, did you find anything?
I found the white paper where that was defined.
Oh.
But it was not defined as, like, this is what consumer routers should be using, because that stuff came, like, a decade later. This was, like, 95.
Yeah.
I should have pulled the paper up in front of me, but, like, some of it is kind of over my head, because my understanding is this is still in the classful networking days, if you know what that means.
No.
Before networking became classless.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
I've always known networking to be classless.
I agree with you. Like, I don't know what that distinction means.
I'm curious.
Other than I think the classes are denoted by letter. I think it's like Class A, Class B, Class C networks, if that rings a bell.
Is that the top?
I don't know. Like, I'm talking out my ass here.
Yeah, okay.
I read about this stuff in a white paper.
If you know, email us.
Yeah, like I'm sure some of the legitimate graybeards that have been on shell accounts since the 70s may have some idea what we're talking about.
I'm very interested in this now. I looked a little bit too to see if I could find anything, and I couldn't find any. Like everybody, it seems like Google uses 10.15 for their hardware.
Okay.
which I
So
was
yeah,
surprised
it's not
by.
mandated.
Well, so the only thing you can't do is have a NAT. You can't double NAT where both NATs have the same private subnet.
Okay.
So like for me, my AT&T router I can't turn off the NAT on the AT&T router. So I just have it's running 192.168.1. something, and then my Google Home stuff runs 10.15.0. whatever.
Yeah, I think I mentioned last week that I ran into that when I set up this VPN.
Yeah.
I had to change my subnet here because I knew I was going to be on the same subnet on anybody else's LAN, and they can't both be the same,
Exactly.
or they can't intermix because that causes all kinds of problems. Here it is. Let me. Oh gosh, there's 2 white papers. Do you care?
I know. Hit me.
Is this actually worth talking about?
I think it's fascinating.
Here it is. RFC 1918, I believe.
Oh yeah, and that's a great one. It's
Everybody,
a real
it's a
banger.
classic. Everybody knows from. Oh, is there not a date on this? It's February 1996. Some of the undersigned companies, Silicon Graphics, Cisco,
Wow.
and Chrysler.
Huh.
Um,
Maker of fine automobiles.
yeah, it's basically. Gosh, this is. I don't know. Do you really want me to go through all this?
I mean, is it just them saying, "Hey, these need to be private ranges"?
Yeah,
That's underwhelming.
kinda.
I was hoping for something really sexy and fun.
A large airport which has its arrival and departure displays individually addressable via TCP/IP. Sorry, okay, here it is. I found it. Private address space. Item 3 in this
Okay.
memo. Best current practice for private address space allocation. The Internet Assigned Numbers Authority has reserved the following 3 blocks.
Oh, that's IANA. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's 10.0.0.0.
So this only started in '96.
Yeah.
Wow.
February 96. So it's 10.0.0.0, 172.16.0.0, and 192.168.
Nobody uses the 172.16 one.
Right. So I guess that's where it trickled down to consumer routers from.
The interesting thing here is they also define the auto-assigned addresses too that you get if your computer, the 169 ones that your computer that your computer does if it can't find a DHCP server.
Right. So anyway, I mean that's just a kind of a.
So that's where it came from, but we don't know why.
Why those addresses?
Why those
specifically.
addresses?
It doesn't really. I didn't read the entire white paper or the entire memo. It might actually.
It may have just been a big block that they hadn't assigned to anybody yet. Like it may have been. It could be just something as simple as, hey, these 3 ranges don't have any assigned IP addresses in them yet, so we can dole them out safely.
That may be the very simple explanation. But anyway, I also scrolled down to the list of authors at the bottom, just because I'm fascinated by internet history stuff, and was very curious.
Cisco, Chrysler.
Yeah, like Cisco and SGI, and those are fine.
Yeah.
Right? But then I became very fascinated that Robert Moskowitz from Chrysler was on this list. I dug into it a little bit. As far as I could tell, he was the head of essentially like
their IT department,
or it may have been a little
CTO
more
or something.
Right. I don't know if he was quite a CTO, but it seemed like he had a little more authority than just head of IT. But like, it seemed like he was very forward-looking in creating a corporate network and getting it integrated with the internet.
That would have been right about the time that people started getting really interested in that.
Right.
Yeah.
To the extent that even though he was just working for Chrysler, he became part of like defining these standards.
At some
Because he was
point,
probably just one of the first people doing it at a corporation, even though it happened to be a car maker.
probably that wasn't a tech company. Probably that wasn't IBM or Microsoft or somebody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like if you think about it, before that, Microsoft would have had networks earlier on, and IBM would have, Cisco would have, and those companies would have. But like, why does a car company need a computer network? That's madness.
Sure.
Just carry that floppy.
Yeah. So if you happen to be Robert Moskowitz and you want to get in touch to talk to us about defining address spaces on the early internet, we would love to talk to you.
I think that's as good a place as any to wrap it up.
Was that self-indulgent?
No. This is why I'm here. I want to learn weird shit about the internet. I want to learn weird shit about everything.
Yeah.
I hope that's why everybody's listening too.
Totally.
By the way, thanks. We had a lot of really great reviews this week. Had a lot of great comments on Twitter.
Yeah.
We set up an email address finally.
Oh.
Yes, it is bradandwilltechpod@gmail.com. That's Brad and Will spelled out, techpod, all one word, gmail.com.
Much like IP addresses, Gmail addresses are hard to come by.
I just had to
these
somebody
days.
had TechPod. I don't know what the hell they
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, you can send us emails.
Yeah, we should read some emails.
Yeah, we love. Well, I don't know if that might be an infringement, but
Emails is universal, man.
we'll call
open
them
standard.
electronic mails
Yes,
here, sir.
electronic missives.
Yes, your letters from the void.
Yes.
Twitter's still good. I'm Will Smith.
Yeah.
You're Brad Shoemaker.
Yes.
We have forestalled doom on the podcast hosting front, at least for the short term.
Yeah.
And are working on some alternatives and other ways to fund that.
Yeah.
Which we'll hopefully have stuff to talk about soon. Keep an eye on Twitter.
Yeah.
And thanks for reviews. Reviews on iTunes are great.
Yes. And thanks for listening.
We love them. Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for coming back. We were excited. I'm stoked. I'm still surprised that people want to listen to this.
Yeah, I'm amazingly, eternally grateful that anybody wants to listen to us jabber.
Plus, I get to come over and hang out in your living room once a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to think we make
It's a good podcast studio.
A decent home here.
Yeah. No, it's lovely.
This is one of my favorite topics in the world. I would sit here for another 2 hours and talk about this stuff if we could. But
I mean, if people like it, send questions and we'll do more.
If we could focus more on this particular subject and like drill down on any one of these things, or
this can be the 100. This is like the survey class, and then we'll hammer in.
Sure. Yeah.
If people are into it, I think next week we should do something that's not tech, like not computer tech.
You're probably right.
Yeah, space planes.
Oh, man, it's scary to
National
get out
Aerospace Plane.
Scary to get out of your wheelhouse.
Underwater cable laying ships.
You like space?
Space is cool.
We're talking about space.
Did you see that they mated the Starlifter?
They
the
did
other
what?
day? The Starship, the Elon Starship.
Oh no,
it's really shiny.
I did see the director of NASA talking some mess toward SpaceX though.
Man, I want to talk about SLS, but we should get an expert on to talk about SLS. And all the experts I know work at NASA, so they probably can't talk about SLS in the way that SLS is a boondoggle.
Yeah.
It's a bad idea.
What does SLS stand for?
Space Launch System.
Okay.
It's the spaceship that's supposed to take us to the moon. It's too big.
Is that a private enterprise? Like
that's public. That's the one we're paying for. You and I are paying for it right now.
Like that. Like I have find space everything a chore to follow now because it's
too much. It's fragmented.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's too much of a chore to distinguish between what is private enterprise and what is a public effort.
It's like when we went from you just bought a 3DFX card in like 1995, 96.
I thought we weren't doing computers anymore.
And then a year later, there were 12 companies making 3D accelerators.
Yeah.
And then there were 2 companies making 3D accelerators. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. Like basically what is pure exploration and discovery, and what is kind of
nothing.
Commercial.
Nothing is everything's commercial.
What is commercial in nature?
It's all,
and how they intermingle has made that whole subject a little bit more annoying to pay attention to than I would. Like.
Yeah.
So maybe we should talk about space sometime.
Well, send us if you have stuff you want us to talk about. Send it in. Brad and Will made a tech pod. That's Brad and Will.
Brad and Will Tech
Pod
at gmail.com.
Is that right?
Okay.
I'll get it right by the 6th or 7th episode.
That's fair.
I guess we'll see you all next week.
All right. Yeah. We'll stop rambling.
Yeah. Okay.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.